Hi class, welcome to week 7 and 8 and the very end of our very short semester. I am not going to be recording another video for week 8 just because the information will be essentially the same. But if you do have any questions about any of the information in this video or would like to have me explain some sort of concept more thoroughly, just let me know. I can post something else, I'm just not anticipating doing so. So, the contents for this piece, we're going to be reflecting a bit on week 6, which looked great, so no concerns there. Slide deck resources, I want to make sure that if you're not as familiar with PowerPoint or if you're not as comfortable with something like Google Slides, that you have some resources that show you how to use those effectively. Keep in mind here, we're really not looking for form, we're not looking for beautiful slides, we're just looking for content. So it will help you, though, through navigating the program if it's valuable to you. Then we'll talk about our final draft assignment, our final draft for the semester. So I'll go over those aspects, and then we'll just talk a little bit about the close of the course, how you will see your final grades, things like that. So as I mentioned, here I've got video access again. I'm very excited. Um, so I do apologize for last week. I hope that doing the captions was enough to be able to work through those slides. Based on the assignments that I've looked at so far, everything seems to have gone very well. I do want to say that I am going to be posting all of your feedback on that assignment today, so you can take a look at it. This is Wednesday the 7th, so you can take a look and see what kind of response that you got from the rough draft, because that information will directly translate into the final draft of this assignment as well. So slide deck resources, I just want to say at the very beginning, don't let the terminology itself intimidate you. When I say slide deck, I'm really just saying a unified series of slides. Like, it's not something that's supposed to be intimidating by any means. You're just putting together several different slides, like a slideshow, that are all on the same topic. And in terms of what I'm asking you to do for this assignment, you have very, very clear directions on what to put on those slides. So don't let it intimidate you. Your job here is to kind of condense what you've already done, look at your research, and figure out how best to sell, how best to market Runway. PowerPoint versus Google Slides. I just wanted to let you know you can use either. Everyone should have free access to Google Slides because you're still on the Google network. Some of you may have access to PowerPoint as well, depending on whether you are faculty or staff at SAU. But either one works. Do keep in mind, though, if you're concerned about having to, for instance, subscribe to PowerPoint because you don't currently have it, know that Google Slides is perfectly okay and you have free access to it. So you should not have to pay any sort of money to access one of these two programs. I also posted quite a few slide deck resources on Blackboard, just kind of basic stuff. If you do have any questions about what a slide deck looks like, or you know how to put together a slide deck, bit by bit. Um, that information should all be on our Blackboard site. I can also provide you with more if you still have other questions. And as I reminded you earlier, we're really looking for content versus form here. The grant application itself states that the form of the slides, so how pretty they are, how nicely, set up they are, isn't going to come into play when awarding the grant. It's just going to be the content itself. Now, of course, you want to have a readable slide deck, but even if you choose not to do any sort of background stuff like this, fancy little swirly kind of mid-century modern stuff, it doesn't matter. You're really just focusing on content, and I will be grading you on how well you do condense that information from the rough draft into these particular slides. The draft itself, or the final draft assignment itself, I did want to let you know that you have on the assignment sheet, and it's posted as a PDF because I couldn't change the formatting on this very easily. You have an entire list of what these slides are supposed to be. So you're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. Like you're literally saying, okay, here is where I am going with this particular, you know, like question three, and put the information on there and you're fine. I'm going to try to switch over to my assessment page so that I can show you that assignment. So hang on for just a sec. So I hope that that worked. I'm kind of trying to meld two videos together in process, but I did want you to note here that the assignment, as I mentioned, is in PDF. It's not just going to pop up. And the reason for that is that if you scroll down, you have directions for all of the slides. You have exactly what they're looking for in this slide deck. They have asked for a 13 slide deck. The first slide is just information about the company and yourself. The last slide is additional information if you have any. So, what I'm anticipating is that you submit an 11 slide deck. You don't have to do the introduction because I already know the company that you're working with and I know who you are. And you don't have to provide more information. Also, do keep in mind that if you feel like you don't have some of the information that you need to be able to effectively answer one of these questions, and we're going to go through them just to make sure they're clear. Um, I'm not asking you to try to come up with information that you simply wouldn't be able to come up with, right? So do your best with this. I've tried to also provide you with feedback on that on the rough draft just to make sure you're comfortable with the information you have. I do promise that the information that you've got in the rough draft is enough to complete this final assignment. So you'll note that the grant application actually goes through each of these slides and says this is exactly what should be on them. Keep in mind that slides are not designed to be text heavy, really. They're designed to point to ideas and show your, in this case, reader, because this is not a presentation that you record, it is literally just a slide deck. Um, Show your reader why these particular points are important to your business and why Runway is doing these things or will do these things very well with the information or the money provided by the grant. So, for instance, you've got slides 2 to 3 ecosystem vision. We already talked about grant ecosystems, right? We talked about business ecosystems, and you guys had really fantastic answers about what is a business ecosystem on your quizzes. You're familiar with that concept now. So here, you're going to look at this left column and say you have to address the organization's mission, vision of a thriving ecosystem. So, what would that ecosystem look like, ideally? Then experience, and then also how funding Runway would help to improve this ecosystem, support the players who are already there. You're basically just talking about like, what do you see happening if Runway is a thriving company, right? Push the vision statement and then say, if this is funded, if we have the resources to be able to do this, this is the vision of the business area that we're in, and it's a good one, right? It's a positive one. These changes are going to be productive. Slides 4 through 6. Really here, I know that the terminology is a little bit complicated, but like in theory of change, it sounds like a philosophy question. But just know that what is being asked here is simply that, what's challenging in the ecosystem now? Like, why isn't it as you envision it? And, um, what could you do to make changes to those problems? And we already did talk about that again in that rough draft. Then slide 7 through 9, the implementation of the plan. So you do not, in this case, need to detail like where every dollar is going to go or anything like that. Just talk about if you had the funding, this is how you would build the business further. So many of you mentioned, for instance, that Runway has essentially a dual purpose, right? It's supporting entrepreneurs, but it's also planning to use AI technology to be able to support these entrepreneurs in producing these grant applications. So there are two different areas that you're going to have to be thinking about in terms of funding. One is just building resources for entrepreneurs, right? And the specific groups of entrepreneurs that don't have access to as many resources. But then you're also going to have to think about, okay, how are you going to get this AI aspect going? So, you know, talking about how the funding can be used for either or both of those areas, I think is perfect here. And things like the value proposition you've already thought about and the risk factors you've already thought about in the rough draft as well. So I do think that you will be able to produce slides that point to exactly where the money would go in terms of the mission of the organization, but don't think about it on the dollar level or anything like that. Size 10. So how would you get feedback on your business if you were to get this money and develop these things out? How would you determine whether these are effective changes? And then also just down here, identification of key relevant stakeholders in the contestants innovation ecosystem. You've already talked about that too. You came up with areas where you, this is basically week 5 work, but it also came into play, or week 4 work, but it also came into play in the assignment for weeks 5 and 6. Who's doing what already, right? Like who would be benefited and gain from the changes and the funding that Runway might receive? Then also, I mean, who is it competing against, right? Like, why is it doing something unique? And this is a big chunk of the slides because it wants to, the HSA wants you to differentiate yourself from every other company that's applying for this grant, right? Like this is what we do and this is why it's important, but also this is why we're the only ones doing it, right? Yes, of course there are going to be other companies supporting entrepreneurs. Yes, many companies are trying to use AI to build up different kinds of opportunities for employees or for businesses, but talk about why Runway is doing something unique and why that's important. I feel fairly tech savvy this week, switching between slides and switching between views of our Blackboard site. So, regardless, proud of myself. I'm just going to go ahead and cover these other areas very quickly because we did talk through the questions a bit. Just like with the slide deck itself, don't let the terminology intimidate you, right? I mean, this is actually kind of proving Runway's point, right? If you don't have the business background, some of these questions that are being asked, even though it's relevant information, it's not clear what's being asked for. Mr. Runway wants to make it more accessible. Like, I think that this application is a great opportunity to sort of illustrate that, right? I mean, it's still not accessible to everyone, and that's what Runway wants. Um, you're responding, as I mentioned, to the application instructions. They're all in the assignment, so you do not have to wonder what you're putting on each slide. It says specifically. The content is all dictated by those directions, and your overall goal is to sell Market Runway to the grant committee, talk about how it's unique, talk about how it's well poised to support entrepreneurs, and talk about how it's going to change the way that businesses in its area operate. All right, so our final considerations for the class. I just wanted to point out a couple little things because we are coming up to the end of the semester. If you do have any missing work that you intend to submit, please do submit it as soon as you can. Once I get into grading these final assignments next week and trying to tabulate final grades and such, it's kind of too late. Like I can't get to a ton of makeup work as well. So just make sure to get it in. You could also contact me and talk about your plan for submitting the work. I'm happy to support that if you do have any questions or concerns. I will be posting our final grades on Monday, 5/19, so the Monday after graduation. I will also email you at that point or send you an email through Blackboard letting you know that your final grade is posted. And you'll have the opportunity to check it and kind of look at what it is and ask any questions you have about it before I actually submit the final grade, which will be the subsequent day. So take a look at it on Monday. I'll remind you in that email and then go ahead and ask any questions that you've got. So, I also wanted to let you know that just because I'm giving you that review time at the end and making sure that everything looks good, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't already be reviewing what's on Blackboard. If you see a sign or any sort of mistakes right now, I would very much appreciate you letting me know so I can fix them early. I keep going over the grade book and making sure that, assignments are appearing and feedback is appearing. But